Charles of Paris held out against the English onslaught. England's King Edward and the Black Prince abandoned the siege. They marched towards Chartres to try their luck at conquering a less formidable target. But before they could attack, a violent storm hit the army. Killing 1,000 English soldiers in a tempest of hail and freezing winds. To Edward, this Black Monday disaster seemed like divine retribution. A sign that it was time to stop waging war and make peace with France's King Jean. But even as peace between kings was reached, the people of France were still living in bloodshed and turmoil. Between 1358 and 1370, France was in chaos. Peasant uprisings, rampaging bands of mercenaries, and civil war ravaged the country. Peasants rose in rebellion, killing their lords and wreaking havoc. Mercenary bands also roamed the land. Known as routiers, they had once been hired by the English to fight against the French, but were cut loose when peace was reached. They systematically ravaged and pillaged towns across France. And with King Jean prisoner in England, his son Charles the Dauphin faced homegrown attacks on his rule by powerful French lords, beset from all sides. The Dauphin's forces had to regain control over their own country. Having only recently been crowned King of France, Charles V dispatched his army to the French-held village of Évreux to forge order from chaos. From here, the army would move to extinguish three major threats: bands of roving mercenaries harrying the countryside, a peasant uprising, and attacks from a rival for the French crown, Charles of Navarre. The French army would start by reclaiming the rebel-held villages of Cocherel, Jouy, and Croissy.
Toutes unités.
Attention. Pace mauvais. Cuidamus. Equites in avant. Es facile, cavalier.
Cursores, in avant, cursores. Relâchez cavale.
Dolme bien. Pace mauvais. Sibolies. Orchestre. Cuitamus, come montes. Si comprende. Ok. Second commandement. Okay.
In taking the village of Jouy, the French army was closer to stemming the peasant rebellion and regaining control. As the French army struggled to regain control of the countryside, they were struck by a band of English routiers. These mercenaries had been cut loose by the English army and were plundering the countryside in order to make a living.
Ascolte bene.
Audite, milites. Si comprendo. Equites, in avant. Come montes.
The French forces eliminated the routier attack, but more were still raiding the countryside in search of provisions and riches. The village of Poissy, rich in gold deposits, was a crucial town for the French to reclaim. The routiers demanded payment from the French, or they would continue their horrifying raids.
Es facile, Cavaria. Io develo l'inimico. Come montes.
The French army defeated the rebels at Poissy and took control of the gold-rich village. The central monastery town of Cocherel was still under the control of rebel peasants. The French army would have to take it before they could launch an assault on Charles of Navarre.
Sieste. Arquer, in avant. Deusei. Intendo. Ambula. Ryan Safranov. Bene, bene. Arquer, in avant.
The French discovered the routier hidden camp and could put an end to the English raids if they could destroy the camp.
Obedio. Bene, bene. In avant, Arquer. Deusei. Oye! Vade, Arquer!
With the routier camp destroyed, mercenary attacks were no longer a threat.
Intendo. vedio. Deus ex! In avant, Darkier! Deus ex! Deus ex! Gente seguida! In avant! Archer! Deus ex!
The French army took control of the rebel villages, and the peasant uprising was subdued.
Choptemper.
But to keep control over the region, they would need to defend its center of influence, the monastery at Cocherel. Northeast of Cocherel, Charles of Navarre's army had established a fortified camp. The King of Navarre sought to make himself ruler of France as well. He intended to press his claim by destroying the newly arrived royal forces.
On the Guerpits, Archer. Archer, allons brillement. Archer, allons brillement. Archers, prenez vos axes. Oui. Advisez votre passage. Archer. Archer, brillement.
Pushing up the hillside, the French discovered Charles of Navarre's camp. His front line had the high ground and was made up entirely of archers. The French would have to think carefully about how to approach the stronghold.
On the Guerpits, Archer. Chasse qu'une saillette doit valoir. Traillette.
The French army had repelled Charles of Navarre, stemmed the revolt, and held back the raids of the Routiers. In the struggle for control over France's lands, the king still clung to power. rebels and raiders eliminated at Cocherel, King Charles V faced one last threat to France: the relentless English invaders. Word arrived that the English army was weak and scattered, divided by infighting. The king quickly directed his army to chase down the old enemy of France at Pontvalin.